Okay, so picture this. November 2025, Johannesburg. The G20 Summit is on. All the world's most powerful leaders are supposed to be there. But one chair is just empty. Completely empty. Today, we're going to dig into why that one empty chair is such a big deal, why it might just signal a massive shift in global power, and what it tells us about where international cooperation is heading. So let's set the scene. It's November 23rd, 2025. The G20 Summit in Johannesburg, a really historic one, is wrapping up. And it ends with this just incredible image. You have South Africa, the very first African nation to ever chair the G20, and they're supposed to be handing over the presidency to the United States. But instead of a handshake, they're handing it over to an empty chair. I mean, no president, no top diplomat, nothing. Just a void where you'd expect a superpower to be. And that single moment, that one symbolic act, it just begs a huge question about where we're at in the world today. I mean, why would the next G20 president, the incoming president, boycott its own summit, especially one that's the first ever held on African soil? Well, the answer really gets to the heart of a deep, deep clash of worldviews.
All right, so to really get a handle on that empty chair, we've got to rewind a bit. We need to look at what South Africa was actually trying to do here. See, this wasn't just another G20 meeting. No, this was supposed to be a landmark moment, a real chance to put the priorities of an entire continent, and frankly the whole global south, right there on the world stage.
So they had this really ambitious agenda, and it was all built around three big ideas: solidarity, equality, and sustainability. The whole point was to get past the usual talk and actually tackle the deep systemic problems that are holding back so many developing countries, what we often call the global south. And President Cyril Ramaphosa, he really summed up this ambition perfectly with this quote. He said, "The greatest opportunity for prosperity in the 21st century lies in Africa." So you see, he wasn't framing this as just another meeting. He was saying, hey, the world's economic future is tied to Africa's future. It was a call for real partnership, not just handouts. So what did that agenda actually look like? Well, let's break it down. First, it was about fixing a global financial system that, let's be honest, often just buries developing countries in debt. It was also about getting real money for climate adaptation and making sure that the shift to green energy is fair and doesn't just abandon communities that rely on older industries. And this is a huge one. It was all about closing that digital divide. And speaking of the digital divide, just think about this number for a second. 2.6 billion. That's how many people right now are still offline around the world. We're talking about nearly a third of all humanity just locked out of the digital economy. They can't get to online education or telehealth or digital banking. It is without a doubt one of the biggest roadblocks to global equality we have today. So, the B20, that's basically the business group that advises the G20. They put together a really clear plan to fix this. They said, look, we need to do 4 things. 1, build out the actual infrastructure and get people connected. 2, boost everyone's digital skills. 3, make sure AI is developed ethically and with people in mind. And 4, create digital public systems that can work together. The whole goal, make sure technology is lifting people up, not creating an even bigger gap between the haves and have-nots.
But here's the thing. This incredibly ambitious, forward-looking agenda, it was on a collision course. A direct collision course with a very different worldview coming out of Washington, the America First ideology of the Trump administration.
And this tension, it didn't just pop up overnight. It was building all year. I mean, it kicked off back in February when President Trump accused Pretoria of fueling disproportionate violence and then cut off foreign aid. Then, throughout the year, Washington kept criticizing South Africa's independent foreign policy. And it all came to a head on November 7th, when the Trump administration just formally announced they were boycotting the summit. By the time the summit opened, there was no U.S. leader there, the first time that had happened since 2008.
Okay, and this right here, this really gets to the heart of the whole conflict. On one side, you've got South Africa. They're all about a non-aligned foreign policy, which basically means they're not picking sides between the big global powers. You can see that in their strong ties with their BRICS partners and in their push for what they call progressive internationalism, like their genocide case against Israel at the ICJ. Then, on the other side, you have the U.S. administration, which saw all of that as anti-American. They didn't like South Africa's friendships with China and Russia, and they basically dismissed the whole G20 agenda on things like debt relief and climate finance. With two views so far apart, a clash was pretty much guaranteed.
So, with the U.S. out of the picture, the whole summit was basically fractured. I mean, Any hope of getting everyone to agree on a final statement? That was just out the window. But, and this is where the story takes a really interesting turn, that American boycott had a completely unexpected side effect. First, let's talk about the immediate damage. For the first time ever, a G20 summit ended with no joint declaration. Now, that might sound like a small procedural thing, but it's not. It was a massive public signal that this group, the world's most powerful economic forum, was deeply, maybe even irreparably, divided.
But as that one door closed with Washington, another one started to open. The hostility from the US actually seemed to rally support for South Africa from other places. And the biggest one? Europe. It seems they saw a real opportunity to forge a different kind of partnership.
And how did they show that support? With this number right here. 11.5 billion euros. That's the size of the investment package the European Union pledged to South Africa. And let me be clear, this wasn't just some symbolic gesture. This was a huge strategic and economic move. And just look at where that money is going. Developing green hydrogen, processing critical minerals locally, supporting a just energy transition. Does that sound familiar? It should. These are the exact priorities from South Africa's G20 agenda, the very ones the US administration blew off. It really shows Europe stepping up to engage with the Global South's goals as a genuine partner.
So South Africa's time at the helm is over. And now we get to the final kind of wild, ironic twist in this whole story. The G20 presidency, the baton, has now been passed, at least symbolically, to the one country that didn't even bother to show up. That's right. For 2026, the United States is now in the driver's seat of the G20. And from everything we're hearing, the entire direction of the forum is about to change. And I mean change dramatically.
The new US presidency is talking about a back-to-basics approach. And what that really means is they're planning to scrap a lot of the working groups that South Africa and others fought so hard for. We're talking about the groups on climate finance, global health, gender equality. They're all apparently on the chopping block. The G20's entire scope is about to get a whole lot smaller.
And all of this leaves us with one last really big question. If the G20, which is supposed to be the world's top forum for economic cooperation, starts backing away from the planet's biggest challenges, and as all the major powers seem to be drifting further and further apart, who is going to lead? Who or what is going to fill that leadership vacuum? That's the big, uncertain question we're all left with after what happened in Johannesburg.